Welcome to the Upshot, Multi-World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, you know it, it's Josh Mansfield. And it's time. It's finally time. I'm excited. Josh is excited. We are getting ready for our season preview shows. So we are T-minus 1 week from the start of the 2022 disc golf season at the Las Vegas Challenge. And our next 3 shows are going to be getting you ready, obviously, for LVC, but also for the season. And so we're going to try to give some basic breakdowns of stuff, just so if you're kind of you're new to the show or you're just trying to figure out what the hell's going on this year, we're going to try to give you that info and also dig deep into some of the key storylines and a whole lot more. So Josh, are you excited?
Oh, I'm excited.
This is going to be a blast. Really quick, before we jump in, couple things. We got a couple mulligans, Josh. We talked on the show last week, or on Tuesday, that is, about the Super Bowl halftime show. Mm-hmm. And we were like, why the hell was 50 Cent hanging upside down in this set? I mean, it was like a cool camera shot, but what was that all about? Well, it's been a long time since I've seen the video, Josh, but the music video for In Da Club, 50 Cent's most famous song and the song that he performed at the halftime show, the music video includes him hanging upside down, at the time doing sit-ups and, looking jacked like young 50 Cent. He's looking a little bit more old in the tooth these days, but that was the reference, the homage to the music video. So thank you to the listener who pointed that out, because I had no recollection of the video.
I understand that it's a mulligan. I do have to say, though, at the time that video was released, I was 6. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a pass here. But the fact that I still laugh about it means that it obviously was a little bit comical.
I was a teenager listening to hip hop music. I have no excuse.
No excuse.
This. Also, another quick mulligan. We were talking literally. The news broke while we were recording about the Disc Golf Network, including USDGC and the European Open next year. And it was unclear at that moment whether or not the USDGC coverage would be behind the paywall or not, like it was in 2021, where you had to buy pay-per-view even if you were a DGN subscriber. It is now very clear. If you are a DGN subscriber, you will get access to the live coverage of both of those tournaments without paying anything else, just the standard subscription. So they are moving away from a sort of full paywall pay-per-view model for USDGC. There will still be pay-per-view elements for certain parts of the coverage. So if you want to watch the post-produced, condensed footage with a post-production edit, and your sort of standard what you'd see on YouTube typically, you will have to pay extra for that. At the European Open, I think they're putting President's Cup, the US versus Europe tournament, behind a pay-per-view paywall. Those details are not all finalized and clear, but the key thing to understand, and the thing we're taking the mulligan for, is that the USDGC coverage will be included as part of the normal package for DGN subscribers.
This kind of leads to our next segment, but I just have to say, hearing you say the President's Cup and us getting to watch that again, I'm thrilled. I think this year is going to be, every year it becomes better and better because the level of competition becomes closer to parity. I can't wait to watch that.
We haven't seen legitimate significant crossover play really since 2019. Mm-hmm. We got a little bit at the beginning of 2020. Particularly in the FPO side, but there were a number of MPO players that came over as well right before the pandemic. Those first couple events, remember, Waco got cut short, and then boom, the tour was off for a while, and then when it restarted a couple months later, there were no Europeans playing throughout 2020, and we pretty much only had Chris and Tatar of note coming over in 2021. So we're going to get to that, because today we're going to be talking about the key storylines heading into the 2022 season. Before we do that, though, Josh, the PDGA just announced a full overhaul to their world rankings and the way that they are going to be calculating the world rankings going forward. So I wanted to dig a little bit into that and take a look at the list and compare it to some other rankings that we have out there, and discuss what we think of this new system. So if you're interested, you can go over to the PDGA's website to really read through this whole thing, because it's going to be impossible to break the whole thing down. But basically, the PDGA World Rankings were kind of broken. They'd become outdated, much like the system for picking Player of the Year had kind of fallen behind the times with, the Disc Golf Pro Tour events suddenly becoming a lot more important, but, up until last year really weren't counted very much in the rankings. The world rankings had also kind of fallen off of being relevant. They didn't even calculate them in 2020 because of the pandemic. So they've kind of gone back to the drawing board, talked to players, and established this new system. So, quick rundown. Every US-based major will get a category-based ranking for every player. So what that means is, if you finish, this isn't simple. If you finish first at Worlds, you're first in the category. You get a 1. If you're 10th, you get a 10. Same with USDGC. Same with Champions Cup when it happens this year. We'll come back to the fact that they're not appearing to be including European Open in a bit. So majors get their own category. Each of them gets their own category. That's important. Your average finishing position at Elite Series is included, and you have to compete in at least 8, or you get a penalty. And your 12 best finishes are counted. So if you play in more than 12, your worst finishes get dropped. They also have a category for wins on tour. They have a category for podium finishes on tour. And they have a category for top 10 finishes in MPO, top 5 finishes in FPO. They also have a category for rating. And that is category based. So if you're the top rated player, you get a 1. If you're the third highest rated player, you get a 3. So it doesn't include the actual rating number itself, but rather a kind of like a rank order for each thing. Then you have all of those categories, line them all up, average the result, and that's the number that you get, and that establishes where you are in the rankings. All right? So Josh, does that all make sense so far?
It does, yes.
Okay. So your current top 10 rankings in both MPO and FPO. Here they come. Ricky Wysocki, Paul Macbeth, Eagle McMahon, Chris Dickerson, Kyle Klein, James Conrad, Adam Hammis, Calvin Heimberg, Matt Oram, and Kevin Jones. Okay, that's your top 10 in MPO. And over in FPO, I got to find the page.
I've got them up if you want.
Go.
Paige Pierce, Katrina Allen, Haley King, Missy Gannon, Kristen Tatar, Sarah Hokum, Jessica Weiss, Lisa Fakis, Kona Panis, Owen Scoggins.
Okay. So, Josh, what are your thoughts on those top 10s generated by this system?
Top 10s, I would probably say on the MPO side, I think James Conrad is a little bit too high. Given the formula as it was described, I think it makes sense, and I understand because James's win at Worlds is going to count towards a lot. But James being above Adam, a multi-elite series event winner, and Calvin, who I feel like I can understand him being lower than his typical placement. I would normally place him up in top 5, but I could understand an argument for him being lower. Didn't have a great season last season, but James didn't either. Except for Worlds, James did not have an amazing season. And so I have a hard time putting James up that far and above. guys like Matteo, especially Hammis, like the Hammis James feels out of position to me when I just do the basic sniff test. But otherwise, top 5 look great to me. I think those are fine. Over on FPO, no real no real problems for me on the top 10. I start to have some qualms with it in the 11 through 20 category, but I think the top 10 for FPO look fine.
So, I mean, let's talk about one of the key elements of this system that's going to diverge from what a lot of ranking systems are going to do. And that is that it is going to heavily emphasize major championship performance. Because like right now, right, there were 2 majors for MPO in 2021, USDGC and Worlds. So there are 7 categories: average finish at Elite Series, rating, wins, podiums, top 10s, and then USDGC and Worlds. So 2 of the 7 categories are your major performance. And so what that means is players who play well at majors can really pull themselves up in the rankings, or vice versa. Those who may have had a very good season but didn't play well in the majors can really drag themselves down. So that's why, for example, you see Calvin Heimberg down at 8. You know, if you compare that to, let's say, the UDisc rankings, Calvin Heimberg is 5th. And that's because Calvin finished 42nd at USDGC, and he finished 11th at Worlds. So even though he was top 5 in all of the other categories, those numbers pulled his average down. And let's look at another example. Just outside the top 10, Ezra Aderhold is 11th in the PDGA New World Rankings. In the UDisc rankings, Ezra is all the way down at 33. Okay. Now, UDiscs are a little bit more responsive to what's been happening lately compared to the PDGA, which is like, boom, this is the year. And so you're kind of like looking at everything over the entire year. But again, you're seeing, Ezra being pulled up a little bit by the fact that you're looking at the whole year, not weighting more heavily what happened recently, but also he did pretty well at the majors, 12th and 15th at USDGC and Worlds. So that's going to pull him up a little bit relative to some others. And, like Nate Sexton is 13th. That's because he gets the big benefit of having played really well at the majors. And so I think, I guess the question, of course, is it good to emphasize majors to this extent in the rankings?
I mean, if you're the PDGA, it makes sense that you would emphasize the majors and your rating, right? Your rating is worth, winning Worlds is worth just as much as having the highest rating in the world. Because, I don't know, maybe it's because the organization that runs those majors and provides the rating is the one giving this ranking. Like, it makes sense why the PDGA is the organization that's going to choose to emphasize those. I think that I don't have a ton of problems with the idea of weighting majors so heavily. I think if you look over at MPO, for example, Ricky still comes out on top, even though, when we talked about whether or not Paul McBeth's performance at the majors justifies player of the year, I mean, even with that in consideration, it shows that Ricky still has the better overall ranking, even in a system by the PDGA that would very heavily favor Paul McBeth's performance last season.
Yeah, and it was close. Ricky's average across the 7 categories was 2.14. Paul's was 2.43. And that comes in a, where Paul is behind Ricky in most of the categories that you would expect. Elite Series performance, rating, wins, podiums. They tied in top 10s. But Paul, first at USDGC, second at Worlds, of course, and Ricky was 3rd and 7th, respectively. So those worst performances at the majors, which is the knock, right, on Ricky's 2021 season.
Yep.
And the reason it was a conversation about who should win Player of the Year, and it wasn't just a complete slam dunk, Ricky still comes out on top, but it's close. It's very close. If there'd been another major and it had been a similar story where like Ricky finished 6th, 7th, and Paul won or finished 2nd, that might have been enough to pull Paul into the lead, and I think that would be fair.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a year with 4 majors like 2022, we'll talk more about that in a bit. That I think your performance at the majors is going to start to feel a lot more weighty than just how you do on tour in the week in, week out regular tournaments, because all of a sudden it's not just like a couple tournaments that feel like they're a little bit more important. Like, we have a structure to the season that's going to reward players who play well in the biggest events.
I'm sure Paul doesn't want to hear this, but if Paul wins Worlds, he's at the top of this power ranking.
Does that actually do that? Does it make the difference?
Because if Worlds is a full category and he took a 2 instead of a 1 on that average, I don't know how it doesn't.
Well, we could just do the math.
Okay, let's do the math. I'm almost certain of it.
So let's see. It would go from... Okay, let's see. So 17 goes to 16. And he would be 2.29, which would still leave him just behind.
Just behind. Okay, nope, never mind. I thought it was enough. But
the thing to note is that, like, had he won Worlds, would I put him at Player of the Year at that point?
Right,
I think there's a pretty good chance that I would.
Yeah.
And it does it feel, I don't know if it's fair, and like we discussed this back when we talked about it, is losing Worlds by this crazy shot enough to keep you out of the Player of the Year? I mean, maybe it's fair, maybe it's not, but that's just how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
If you sweep the majors, you got a pretty good case in any sport for winning Player of the Year, even if it's just 2, like it was in 2021. But interesting to see these rankings. They're going to be adding the European rankings as things kind of open up this year, and then they'll merge the rankings together once we have more crossover play, which, all crossing my fingers, that will happen this year.
Here's one thing that we have to talk about. Why is the European Open not being included in this?
I don't know. Maybe it's just a typo, and like they actually mean to include it, but maybe they don't. Because I guess the argument would be that a lot of your U.S. players don't go to Europe and play in that tournament. But I don't think that's enough of a justification, personally. I think part of like being a top disc golf, and I guess you'd get the bonus of being able to drop one of your results if you play all 4. But it feels like punitive to Europeans not to include it.
Well,
I don't love it.
I will say here at the top, because I thought, so they call the article PDGA World Rankings Return. And then if you go to the actual rankings, they say United States Tour Ranking.
Yeah, it says that the European Open results will factor into European rankings, which that makes obvious sense.
But
then the question is, when you merge them, like, how do you account for the fact that there's more majors in the U.S. and fewer? I assume they've thought about this.
Okay, I'm gonna go with that assumption as well because it feels weird. But
personally, I think we're at the point in disc golf where, if you're a player in the U.S. and you decide not to play in one of the majors because you don't want to go to Europe, okay, but then like suffer the consequences of not being considered as, like that you should get punished for that, essentially. And like there's sort of a mechanism for that, because if you play all 4, then you get to lose one of your worst performances in the terms of the rankings. But I think most of the top players are going to go to the European Open this year. I've seen some people say they're going to skip it. And the justification has been they're worried about COVID stuff still, but I really don't think that's going to be relevant this summer. I got to be honest.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood. Please, God, knock on wood. But anyway, people can make their own decisions, but I think I would like to see them include all of the majors in these rankings. So let's move on it's time to talk about the biggest storylines heading into the 2022 season. All right. So quickly first, I want to just talk about the schedule and just run through the schedule really fast. So everybody has like a mental map of what the schedule is this year. And so here we go. Obviously, it starts next week, Las Vegas Challenge. Then we go to the Texas Swing. We got Waco and the Texas State Disc Golf Championships. And then we have our first major of the year. Springtime Major. Hello, Champions Cup. Welcome to the program. That's in April in Georgia. Then we come back to the Midwest, and we go to Jonesboro, and then DDO, and then out to the West Coast for OTB Open and Portland Open. Those are the only two Elite Series events on the West Coast this year. Remember that Masters Cup and Beaver State Fling are both going to be Silver Series. Then the Preserve is in late June. U.S. Women's Disc Golf Championship, the U.S. Women's Major, is in early July. Idlewild, and that's falling like right in the start of the European stretch. So the European Open follows next in mid-July. Then D-Glow at the end of July. Ledgestone, Des Moines Challenge, Worlds in Emporia. Then now we're at the end of August. Early September, we head out to the East Coast and stay there for the rest of the season. GMC and MVP Open, which will be playoff events for the Pro Tour. Then the USDGC and the Throw Pink Women's Championship in Rock Hill in early October, and the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship the weekend following. So that is your schedule this year. The first time we've got 4 majors. So let's just take a second and talk about the 4 majors, because this has been a thing we've been talking about for years. Like, when are we going to get 4 majors? And Josh is finally here. How is this going to change the complexion of the season?
I think, like you said, that playing well at all 4 majors is going to be enough to set you apart from, regardless of regular season, regular tour, I don't know what you want to call it, tour results, because it no longer feels just like an anomaly. It no longer feels like a fluke that you played so well at 2 events. It's that you played well at 4 events, and it was always on the biggest stage when the pressure was at its highest. I also think this is going to become noteworthy, and why results are going to feel at the majors more important is because tournaments that bookend majors always feel less significant. You have people who skip events in order to go prepare. You have people who take them off afterwards because they want extra rest or travel time. And so if you are on either side of a major, while it still may be played, let's look at Champions Cup, for example. The Texas State Disc Golf Championships are several weeks in advance. We're still, even as we're talking about that, going to be talking about it in the context of what does this tell us about the PDGA Champions Cup? And so those results inherently get built into a greater calculation of how we talk about majors. And so because there's so many of them, more events are going to feel less impactful on either end of those majors because they're talked about in the context of the major. It elevates the major, it devalues those tournaments around it, and I think is going to overemphasize the importance of playing on the majors this year.
I mean, the question is whether it's going to overemphasize it or if it's going to emphasize it correctly. When you think about other sports, you talk about the majors. I mean, unless you're a hardcore golf fan, you don't know what the hell's going on in week in, week out tournaments. I don't know. I could not tell you who won. They just had the Waste Management Open, and it was, in the news because dude hit a hole-in-one on hole 16 where they have this insane, like, Coliseum-like seating all around this par 3, and like people just went berserk and threw like hundreds of gallons of beer into the air, like, and this tournament, save this episode concept for another day. Disc golf tournaments finding their own identities. The Waste Management Open has an identity, and it is party season. But I don't know who won it. I'm sure I saw, but I don't remember. But I know who won the majors. And that, like, I'm actually excited for disc golf to get to the point where casual fans can just be like, oh, so-and-so won the majors. So-and-so won Worlds and USDGC and European Open and Champions Cup. Because not everybody's going to have the stomach for a DGN subscription and week in, week out. I'm watching every tournament. And that's a good thing because you need to be able to make space for casual fans. And it's been hard. To be a casual fan has been a little bit difficult, in my opinion. Like, the way that makes it easy, I guess, is that you just watch Jomez. You just watch the YouTube and you're like, whatever. But in terms of understanding the value of various tournaments, it's been hard because you've had National Tour and Pro Tour and then a couple majors, but trying to understand how that all fits together is difficult to explain to somebody. And I think this new structure that we're going to have going forward is going to make it much easier for casual fans to get involved. It's like, oh, well, we have these 4 majors, just like tennis, just like golf. And so I'm super excited for that element of this.
I completely agree. In terms of that ace on hole 16, I saw that video as well. And I just want to make note that nobody on ESPN asked how drunk are they when they were showering him in beer, right? So anyway, give us a call. We want to chat a little bit about the double standards there. Yeah, but 4 majors, I think it's a really important step in our sport. It's a really important step in being a fan of disc golf, and I'm happy that it's going to be here this season.
So the other key storyline in my mind, sort of the biggest thing, and basically the first thing that came to mind for me when we started to sit down and map these out, the Europeans are coming back and international disc golf is back on the menu. Not only are we going to get the European Open back this year, again, knocking on wood, but we're going to have a large contingent of European players coming over. Got to check out our series on the website, the European Reopen, where we break down some of the key European storylines, give you bios of all the players. Shout out to Jesse and Steve and Boye for all their work putting this series together. We got a bunch of interviews coming out as well. But I can't wait to see how the Europeans stack up with the Americans again after a couple of years of everybody sort of just honing in their own countries and not having a lot of chances to get out there and really compete, even across European countries. It's been a little bit rare. So this is a huge part of the story of the season. Whether it will remain so is going to depend on how well the Europeans play.
I think that's exactly right. It's funny because we look at last season when Kristen Tatar came over and just played exceptional during her stretch here, and we think, wow, as soon as the Europeans are back, and I've said it myself, we could see podium sweeps by European, especially in FPO. Well, you and I were doing some research for the show today. We looked back, and at the European Open in 2019, the last time the European Open was played, Paige beat Henna by 17 strokes to take the win. So
crazy.
It's really tricky to know what's going to come of this season in terms of how the Europeans are going to play. We have MPO players who I believe are far and beyond where the MPO competition was 2 years ago.
100%.
You have, and the ratings alone demonstrate that, I think, that you see a little bit closer parity and can very easily include them. I also think that those ratings may be could change quickly and go up if they play well on tour. They could really benefit from playing with that elite competition. And you could see ratings climb quickly for some other players. On the FPO side, I mean, we've long known the European women are very good and are capable of competing at the highest level. And then Kristen Tatar shows up and reminds us just how good they are. And now you have to ask, was that sustainable? Is that stretch going to be something that the European women are just able, because now there's 3 of them. So maybe Kristen Tatar doesn't win every event, but Kristen Tatar is oftentimes seen in that. I mean, Evelina is the one that's the de facto considered best when you talk about the European women often. And so Kristen Tatar is not even the top European FPO player. It's really fascinating to see the way that the storylines have been shaped coming into this season based on our little snippets, just small clips and highlights that we were able to get from some European disc golf and some European players over here. And I think it's the most exciting storyline because of the unknown. we know that a lot of these other storylines that we're going to talk about, we know that Ricky's going to play well. We know that Eagle, despite his injury, is still going to have a successful tournaments at like LVC because he can throw a mile. We know that Paul is an elite player. We know that Paige is still one of probably the best FPO player to ever play the game. But we don't know where the Europeans fit in. And that's exciting.
So, Josh, what's next on your list for big storylines?
I would say that my next big storyline would probably be around the tour again. And the question as to whether or not which tournaments are at risk of falling off and which ones are going to be added to the Pro Tour. I think this is the first season that we've really seen, we've talked about it. We've talked about tournaments being added, the Preserve, for example, making its way on. And we've talked about tournaments falling off, but it really feels like this year was the most serious, where the Beaver State Fling and Masters Cup both getting pulled from the Pro Tour. It happened, right? We've talked about it for years, and
yeah, I mean, technicality, it got pulled from the National Tour and we're not added to the Elite Series on the Pro Tour, but
right,
I get your point.
Yeah, it's
right.
It's not, and lots of players are still playing it. They're still Silver Series. They're still worth something. But when you look at the schedule, it's not an Elite Series this year because of the combined merge tour, and it was a convenient time to push off, the problem tournaments in terms of live coverage. I'm interested to know who and I mean, they did it, and I didn't see quite the outrage that I expected, to be completely honest, on social media. I don't know if it was the way that it was done. I think that there are tournaments this year, though, that are at risk of getting pulled by next year.
Which ones? Name names, Josh.
I'm going to do it. And this is not necessarily to knock, sorry, Corey, you gave me a great time while I was in Vegas, but I really think the Las Vegas Challenge is at risk. Paul articulates something that is very critical about that tournament, and that playing 3 courses in those 4 days, especially with early season things like the All-Stars event, for example, taking place, it's too much. It's not a tournament that is done anywhere else in that style with that many courses. And I think that that's going to be a problem for LVC moving forward if they don't adapt to a more traditional tour. I'm not even talking about the fact that I think it's long and not as compelling as other courses, though I will say, Corey, it kicked my butt. Don't worry. It's definitely harder than I thought. But it's a tournament that does not feel conducive to what are the standards of a professional event that we have decided are probably best for the sport and best for the pros. And I think that puts it at risk of being cut next year.
I mean, isn't the simple answer for them, though, is just to cut to 2 courses?
Yes.
I mean, I don't understand why they haven't really done this already. Because I think that the facilities and like the location, a lot of it makes sense in the context of the rest of the season. You got to start somewhere. And you want to start playing in February, so you got to be somewhere where it's warm. And there's not that many options. You've got, the southwestern desert, and you've got Florida, southern Florida. And so where are you going to put this? Where are you going to put the tournament? I mean, I've always called for it would be great to start a season in Florida sometime, but it just doesn't seem like that really fits into the flow of the season all that well. But you may be right. I mean, LVC was dropped from the Pro Tour for a year, was it not? I know for a fact it was an A tier a couple years back, and then it kind of got re-added. It was an NT at some point, and then it was an A tier only, and then it was a Pro Tour. And, it feels like a little bit like they want to run the tournament their way. You hear from players consistently that like they don't want to prepare for 3 courses. And I understand that. It's like too much. It's hard to practice that many courses. And so that's one on the list. I think if I have to pick one out of here, it's hard to decide where you want to take stuff off. I think it's easier to pick where you want to put something on. So here's the thing. Remember that in 2023, D-Glow and MVP will not be on the tour because their courses are going to be hosting. I said MVP,
GMC.
I meant GMC. The courses are going to be hosting majors in 2023. So you have some natural built-in. Okay, we're going to take these two stops off because we're going to put majors there. People talk about Eagles Crossing. People talk about the Pittsburgh Flying Disc Open. There's a bunch of tournaments that I can see getting added. The question is, where do you subtract? I think that's a difficult question to answer because so many of these courses are solid.
I've got two more for you. I'll give you.
Texas States is like, do we need two in Texas? I'm not sure.
I agree. I think one of the Texas tournaments is at risk, and not even. There are so many good tournaments in Texas. I worry that there are people who are making concerted efforts to change the shape of the Texas swing because
Open at Belton, while its course I think doesn't live up quite to the standard of top tier courses on tour, they have a lot of things going for it when it comes to spectator ability, and they're doing the cool stuff with like designed greens that's interesting and different. There's going to be pressure on those Texas tournaments because I think you can't, you're not going to have two in Texas forever.
I have one more that I think is really at risk, and next year is going to be the year that I think kind of sets up for it. It's D-Glow. D-Glow is always under, especially with more players going to the European Open. It doesn't fit well with the schedule. It should be a Silver Series. I'm sorry. I think it should be a Silver Series.
You think it should be a Silver Series?
I do, especially with how many players are going to the European Open this year. I think even if they've announced they're going to D-Glow, you're going to see players who change their minds and just drop it. They're not going to play it. It's too close to the European Open, and you can't run it up against Ledgestone any more than you already do. And so I really think. Go ahead.
D-Glow starts 5 days after the final round of the European Open, just as a note.
I think D-Glow either needs to find a place further away on the schedule, but I think after it's done hosting Worlds, I would not be shocked to see it just get added as a Silver Series instead.
Going to be an interesting story to follow for sure, because we need some variety. I really want to see some new events get a shot at the sort of the Elite Series. Next one for me, Josh, and you named this one, so I'm going to let you kind of talk it out. The pressure to play up to contracts, either contracts that have been earned, in the Kona Panis, Ricky Wysocki vein, or contracts that are going to be on the table at the end of the season, because we've got contract here, Calvin, trying to chase down a big check at the end of this season. So how do you envision that playing out, that pressure for sponsorship contracts in 2022?
So first off the bat, we talked a little bit about this with Steve. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says contract year Calvin. And I'm going to wear it to every Elite Series, because I feel like that really is that is probably the storyline to follow when it comes to contract years. Because it's critical for him. I also think though that the pressure of, on Kona Panis especially is going to be enormous. Kona, based on her course results, I don't think would be a lot of people's first candidate to receive the type of contract that she did. Again, we talked a lot about this, about her power with social media, and that it's an endorsement deal, not necessarily right, that goes around all facets of her as a player, not just her on-course performance. That being said, she still does need to play well. And I think that at the end of the first season, you're going to have a lot of people talking, if Kona doesn't manage to grab an Elite Series win, that, DD paid $500,000 for, not even getting an Elite Series win on the FPO side out of it. I think it's especially going to be an issue if Valerie Mondahanu, for example, has an amazing season and outplays Kona.
Yeah, like what's the odds that Valerie Mondahanu has the better season? It's at least a coin flip, if not more likely that Valerie Mondahanu outplays Kona.
Yeah. And that, I think, creates real pressure. Pressure on players that affects performances, but also social media pressures. It will affect Kona's, I guess, and her game and her image with DD.
I would rather be talked about as the most overpaid player in disc golf than be grinding on the road, living in a van.
It's fair.
I mean, there's overpaid players in every sport.
Yeah.
Did Kona get a bigger contract than was merited by the, what she can do as in terms of moving plastic? I don't know. I can't speak to that. Is it a pretty large contract considering the on-course performance throughout the career so far? Yes, 100%. The fact that Kristen Tatar and Kona Panis are getting the same money, I mean, you don't even have to look too deep at the results to understand that those seem incompatible. But look, yeah, there's probably going to be pressure. Yeah, if Kona doesn't play well, maybe people are going to talk about how she's drastically overpaid. Okay. She's still going to get the check every year.
She is.
Like, what do you want her to do? Like, she had an opportunity to go out there and she was like, hey, I want Kristen Tatar money. And they were like, all right. And so like, she was probably like, yeah, give me the contract. I would sign that as fast as possible.
Right.
So, I think it's the other thing. Remember, it's a great fit for DD. Like
it is
with the brand. It's just like so perfect. And I think that they're going to do a good job of making the most of that. But I mean, yeah, there's going to be pressure. I just think like if she's overpaid, she's overpaid. Good for her.
And I think you're right. I think, though, there's a little bit of a difference because I can look at, I don't know, I can look at Jared Goff and be like, yeah, that guy's overpaid because he has a job still. Right. And Jared's like, I don't care. Like he's never going to see my tweet that I think Jared Goff was a terrible trade to give up a first round draft pick for. Anyway, Carson Wentz. I was thinking Carson Wentz is the first round draft pick, but still giving up Jared Goff or playing Jared Goff. I'm like, yeah, that guy's overpaid, right? Jared Goff doesn't care. But when you're so closely interacting with fans, with social media, when your ability to move plastic is dependent upon your public perception, I agree. She's going to get the check. DD's going to make the most of it 100%. That being said, I think that Kona is at least going to see that, and that is going to create pressure on her for the season.
Fair. Next one for me. Is Eagle going to make a full recovery? Like I'm starting to wonder about this a little bit. Like some suggestions that maybe he's looking long term to kind of reduce use of the forehand and play with a lefty backhand. Having seen it in action, it's hard to argue that he couldn't still be an incredibly successful disc golfer. Remember that he, despite not throwing a single forehand at the All-Star weekend, still finished second in the singles competition, pretty comfortably in second as well. And, had to get beat out by a extremely sharp Calvin Heimberg. But I do think it's going to take some of the ceiling off of his game if he cannot get back to throwing the forehand with regularity. Now, maybe it just needs rest and we're good to go. But this is definitely a storyline that I am watching heading into the year.
I mean, you've talked about this for years before I was even on the show, that it feels like Eagle, given his weight room training, given his throwing mechanic, his game feels unsustainable. And I think that might be getting proved true. And I'm interested to see what he chooses to do, because it's also, about that choice of, does he try and take some back off the forehand? Does he just try and limit the number of max power forehand? What is he going to do around that game management is going to be an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I also think he literally has the opportunity to become the first great switch disc golfer. that can truly be a dangerous player as an ambidextrous thrower, because the shot shape is just the same throwing lefty back. The spin is the same, folks. In fact, you can get more spin with a backhand than you can with a forehand. So if you can practice that to the point where you're feeling comfortable throwing, maybe not as far as you can throw with your right hand, but, let's say 80% as far or something like that with control, then why can't you just do that all the time? There's no reason you have to throw forehand just because it's the sign of having the all-around game that we always talk about with Eagle. I mean, you can have an all-around game if you can throw the spins in opposite directions on both sides. It doesn't matter whether you throw it as a forehand or as a backhand.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be extremely interesting to kind of just see. And look, this may be a moot point. If he comes fully back and his elbow feels great and he starts throwing forehands again and there's no pain and there's no issues, then we put this story to bed in a couple of months. But it's certainly going to be a story to start the year. He's skipping some tournaments because they're too forehand dominant. How the fact that he still doesn't feel comfortable throwing forehands at this point after the off season has to be a point of concern. So, next one for you, Josh.
I think it's the question of the merged tour. The Disc Golf Pro Tour has taken on a large responsibility by taking over the national tour and merging it into a single tour. We had lots of suggestions for national tour events last season, things that we felt like needed to be improved on. And there were lots of pros who also felt like the standard was not the same. I'm interested to see if, one, are those hiccups resolved? And two, do new hiccups arise by the Pro Tour being in charge of all of it?
It's a lot of work. And you wonder a little bit if it's like too much to manage. I mean, I think we saw with the All-Star event, which was a little rushed. It felt a little helter-skelter at times. It's an exhibition event. I don't want to read too much into it. The other events are more clearly scheduled in advance. But I just think that there's, the company's growing very fast, but it's just a lot to manage the entire tour. And there's fewer weeks off where there's, some other event happening. So we'll see. It's definitely going to be something to follow. We got the 4 majors. We got the unified points earning structure. But, we still don't know what the points earning structure is. As of this moment, we do not know how the points are going to work in 2022 on the Pro Tour and with the majors. That to me is a sign that things are a little behind. Mm-hmm. So we will, I'm sure we will hear about them before next Thursday. Next up for me is, do we see a breakthrough in outside sponsorships, particularly for players? That's going to be something that I'm following. And, we've obviously seen some. You've got like Thunderbird Bar, and there's a few like small brands that you would otherwise never have heard of that are kind of dipping their toe into disc golf. But are we going to see like, a significant, well-known Fortune 500 type company sponsor a player in some way? And we saw a little bit with the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship that we had, LL Bean and Guaranteed Rate, Johnsonville Sausages. Like, these are known names sponsoring this final event. I would expect to see the Pro Tour get some more sponsors like that this year. Does that become a wider trend? Do we see the World Championships get a big name sponsor? Do we see players get big name sponsors? This is going to be a key sign to watch as like, are we seeing the embrace of disc golf from a more mainstream side of business?
And I think paired with that storyline is the question of, what does outside coverage or broadcasting look like? Are we going to get it on ESPN again? Where on ESPN?
Live on ESPN?
Right. To what extent are we going to be able to get disc golf out to the outside world, and what are the benefits that come from that in this season? Definitely a storyline to follow.
Couple more. Josh, what you got?
Yeah, I think the next one to me is probably about the growth of disc golf. and this is one that you had mentioned, Charlie, but I think is really important to ask about, is does this growth normalize? And we can measure that in a lot of ways. Not only can we look at UDisc figures, right, of playing new players, etc. I'm interested in Disc Golf Pro Tour subscribers. Does that number go up? By how much? I'm interested in ticket sales. Are we going to continue to sell out and have scalpers because you can't get a ticket to the World Championship? How much are those tickets going to go for? And where's the threshold? Are VIP tickets still going to sell out? Those are the questions in terms of watching growth trends that I'm interested in seeing, because I think they have a particular business impact as well, or at least financial impact would be the better way to put it. Both in the way that manufacturers are projecting their growth and sales and disc production, as well as the way in the entertainment side, you're tailoring your tickets and broadcasting packages, how much they're going to cost, etc.
So, I mean, I think, conservatively, I think you can estimate that there was about 100% growth in 2020 in the sport. And based on the UDisc numbers, another 50% growth in 2021. Some of those numbers may bleed together a little bit, but do we see, the question I have is not, are we going to see 100% growth again? Because no, we're not. But are we going to see 20% plus, or are we going to drop down into the 5 to 10% range of modest growth? I don't expect to see declining numbers really. I think the question will be, how much do you see a maintained level of purchasing from people who have gotten involved in the last couple of years? Do you see an increasing interest in following the professional side of the game? And do you see PDGA membership growth continuing to go up at a rapid clip, or does it start to flatten out? These are all very interesting questions, and they have implications for the future of disc golf. But we've obviously hit a new level, right? Even if we plateau, we're plateauing at a much higher level. Fascinated to see what the numbers look like, as I hope people are able to go back to go back to the office, start taking their vacations again, and go back to kind of more normalcy in their lives post-COVID. So key thing to follow. The last thing on my list, agents. Welcome to the world of agents in disc golf. Everybody's getting an agent. And, a couple years ago, it was Paul Macbeth got an agent to negotiate his first Discraft deal. Whoa, crazy. And then that felt like it was this sort of little flash in the pan. It didn't really, nothing came of it. Now we have sports management companies. I put that in quotation marks, some guy saying, I'll represent you, and players are signing up for those services. And those range from just contract negotiation all the way up to full management of your social media and your website and your merch and your dry cleaning and your whatever. Players are looking for more support so they can focus on their disc golf. And agents are starting to come to the negotiating table with sponsorship contracts. And I've personally spoken to 3 different people who are agents, and there's probably around, I would say, 10-ish people who are doing this for real in some way. Some of them are just representing a single person. A lot of people know of Ari, who manages Ricky Wysocki's tour. But there's people who represent 5, 10, 15 clients, and players are telling each other, hey, I've got this person who's helping out with my taxes and helping out with my accounting, and they're also going to be able to help me, deal with some of these things that I don't want to deal with. And so this industry has popped up in 3 months, and we're here. How is that going to affect the way things play out on tour?
I really am interested, especially you were talking about in the manager's side of how that changes. I also think it's gonna be interesting to watch how that changes social media dynamics of certain players. We've already seen it start to happen with some players. social media presences from players who haven't been on social media in ages and are being more consistent about it. I think that's going to be the really interesting in-season story until we get to the off-season again, where we may see, some more contract negotiations out of some players.
All right, so those are our key storylines to watch heading into 2022. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going inside the circle. We've got an over-under as well. It's going to be a good one. Stick around. It's the Upshot. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Now, I like a smaller bag. I carry a Pound toolbox around the course, but I am getting a little tired of lugging the bag and having to carry it in my hand. Well, good news, small bag lovers, because I have it on good authority that the Rufus, the new smaller bag from Pound, is coming soon. So keep your eyes peeled to Pound Disc Golf's social media to see when you'll be able to get your hands on the new Rufus. I know I will have one. PoundDiscGolf.com. Welcome back to the Upshot. So our subscriber bonus segment this week is going to be taking a look at the tour and thinking about which players might excel in different parts of the tour, whether we're talking about the sort of Texas and desert swing at the beginning of the season, the Midwest swing later in the season, West Coast swing, majors, maybe we consider them their own category. Obviously, you've got the East Coast at the end of the year. So we're going to take a look at those various parts of the tour when we go from generally more open courses to generally more wooded courses, and think about which players might get wins or outperform their rating in different parts of the tour. So we hope you'll subscribe, join us for all of the benefits that come along with an Ultiworld Disc Golf subscription, less than $4 a month, discgolf.ultiworld.com/subscribe. Now it's time to go inside the circle. Josh, take it away.
Thanks, Charlie. I would say of all the Inside the Circles, we may have more pieces of news to cover in this one than any other since we started this segment. It's a busy week in disc golf, and we've got some breaking news in between the break of our recording. Castoplast has announced that they will be now co-owners of the company with Latitude 64. They will continue with their own production facility, but will also be able to use Latitudes in the same country in Sweden. Castoplast is a company that I don't think is, in terms of production and numbers, is very large compared to some of the larger brands, but it has a real cult following. And so a lot of people are, hesitant and skeptical of what's going to happen to their beloved K1 plastic. I got to say, it's nice plastic. I like it a lot. But it's an interesting step towards Latitude acquiring, and being partners with another company in terms of their manufacturing.
I love this story because, it literally just broke. So I haven't had a chance to talk with anybody about it yet. But this to me is Castoplast recognizing that they aren't going to be able to make enough discs given their current facilities or the amount of money that they have, or whatever the reason may be. And so they're going to look to a partner who not only is much bigger, but also has a track record of helping other companies meet the demand for their products. So, of course, we know that Latitude 64 makes the whole Trilogy lineup. They're also doing a lot of / all of the manufacturing for dynamic discs. And now they're going to also be taking over some of the production for Castoplast. So what I think is fascinating about this...
Discmania. Don't forget Discmania as well.
What did I just say?
You said dynamic discs.
I meant to say Discmania.
I figured. So I wanted...
Trilogy.
There you go. Save you the mulligan.
Thank you. The instant mulligan. I shanked
right.
it so bad that it had to be instantly corrected.
It's doubles. No, that's not a mulligan if we're playing doubles.
Right. We're tapping in for birdie.
That's right.
So here's what I love about this just across the board. So first of all, this seems like a very savvy move for Castoplast. We don't know the terms of the deal. So you wonder, would it have been smarter for them to try to just scale up themselves? But the thing is, they've gone from a brand that people didn't even really know about 3-4 years ago. It really was cult niche. And it feels like I don't know if I would quite call it like a mainstream brand, but particularly because of availability, which I'm sure that this deal is designed to help sort of remedy. But they've gotten so popular, like people are bagging a Berg, and people are excited about the new discs that they're bringing out. And I think it's really because it's not because of hype. It's not because of marketing. It's not because of sponsorships with players. It's because people think the plastic is great and the disc offerings are unique. Those elements are making this company stand out in a market that is generally sort of decided by buzz and who sponsors which player. And I think that's kind of like a neat story in disc golf. Excited to see what this means for Castoplast. I think this could really expand the popularity of the brand simply because now they'll be able to get more discs on the shelves.
Hey, Charlie, I actually have a confession to make. I had a listener tell me that I had to try a Berg and got me one to throw around. Love it. It is in my bag. I used a Berg my past weekend at a tournament for literally every upshot. I didn't touch my Envy for my upshots. So the Berg's a great disc. I gotta give it to him. It's an exciting announcement for Castoplast, a really exciting company.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear more about the deal and what it entails.
For sure. Next up on our news, Brian Earhart has announced that he's going to be joining the Disc Golf Network as an on-course color commentator, as well as a broadcast in the booth for some of the other events. I don't think the schedule's been fully announced yet, but Brian Earhart, we knew he's always done some of this commentary work, some booth work. He's got the coaching side. I think this is a natural progression, and what he says is just really the focus of his disc golf career at this time. So shout out and congratulations to Brian Earhart for making this move in his career.
Yeah, I think it's a great fit for DGN. I mean, it's exactly the right kind of person that they need. It's like somebody who's been on tour, who knows the players, who knows the courses, and also has talent as a broadcaster, and isn't on tour every week. So it's a really good fit for Brian, I think. And I don't really know how much I can say right now because the schedule isn't out, but I will be in the booth alongside Brian for some events this year. So I can say that much.
Okay, that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So next up, Corey Wong, who is the drummer for a band called Wolfpack. That's spelled Vulfpeck. I've never heard of the band personally. I had to go looking, but Corey was featured in a Jomez video playing disc golf with just some of the pros that do the off-season Jomez content. And I don't know if this is. I think this is a evolution of an important part of disc golf where we're getting views from people who aren't otherwise associated with it, thanks to the affiliation of quote unquote, I think we called them B-tier celebrities last time we talked about them during the Pro-Am, Celebrity Pro-Am. And I think this is just a great example of more publicity and interaction with those who maybe aren't necessarily from the disc golf world, but are bringing different eyes to the sport. And I think it's valuable.
Yeah. And the next story in our Inside the Circle is going to be along the same theme here. It's just getting to the point where disc golf is getting popular enough that people from all walks of life, including celebrities, play disc golf. And it gets talked about on podcasts, and it gets, you get people excited to go play with the pro disc golfers, even though they're like probably technically more famous than the pro disc golfers. So yeah, I mean, it's just another sign of the growth of the sport. And I won't be surprised to see some, Leonardo DiCaprio got pictures from him, out on the course flinging it.
Yeah. Let's moving on to the next story then.
With
in
a
that
26-year-old woman, by the
way. Moving on to the next story. Oscar Eriksson is an Olympic athlete for Sweden. He just took bronze in the mixed doubles curling. And Oscar is also a disc golf fan. So another example of celebrities, athletes, pros who are all, bringing publicity to the sport and getting those kind of views in other ways that I think are really valuable. So,
and bringing it all together, Latitude 64, now a co-owner of Oscar Eriksson. and we'll be manufacturing curling stones for Oscar.
Yes.
So
in the signature K1 plastic.
Cool. Oscar Erickson, they win bronze in mixed curling. If you go to his Instagram page, you will find lots of photos of him getting aces. There's a bazillion of him, holding up the one, grinning next to the disc golf basket. And I'm like, this is interesting. Like, I feel like great disc golfers should maybe think about, maybe I should take up curling too. Like, it feels like there's parallels, right? It's like the hand-eye coordination and the ability to have touch that's required to like do a skill-based sport. Like, I guess I'm not surprised that he's out there just acing up a storm. He's a recently minted PDGA member as well.
We need to check, though, what is his definition of an ace? Because the curling's got the big target. Is he just saying if I hit the target, that's an ace? Because that scores in curling.
The basket, Josh. I mean, I think we can give him the credit to know that he's understands what an ace is.
I don't trust those curling folks, man.
Yeah, and they never shoot for the middle anyway. The middle isn't where you want to be. You want to like have it on the edges, blocked by the other things.
That's my point, man.
Denmark match last night.
He's like, I'm just inside circle one. That's an ace, baby. Moving on, USDGC and the Throw Pink Women's Disc Golf Championships have announced their tournaments that are eligible qualifiers for how you can qualify for those events. The little bit of additions, you can go check out I saw it on their Twitter. You can go find their social media and find those list of qualifying tournaments. I think the most notable news, though, is that MPO qualifying spots were reduced previously last season, and for as long as I can remember, have been 5 spots for a tournament. And it's now going to be reduced to 4. So remember, if you go to a tournament, the top 5 players who have not yet qualified for USDGC earn a spot to that tournament. If, for example, Eagle has already qualified by virtue of his placement, then it jumps down to the person below him and it meant that with 5 spots especially, you needed to take like top 40th usually by the end of the season. And that was good for qualifying spots. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that changes, moving those spots down to 4. For the women's side at the Throw Pink Championship, it will continue to stay at 2 per event.
I actually talked to Jonathan Poole, the event director for USDGC yesterday, in part about this. And basically he said, we wanted to open up more events to be qualifiers because of the growth of the game. And we want to have enough regionality so that people could, play something nearby them to be able to have a chance to qualify more events internationally as well. But in order to do that, they had to reduce the number of spots available at each of those events. So there's more qualifying events, but fewer qualifying spots for USDGC. For Throw Pink, it remains the same, 2 a pop. Ultimately, all of the good players get in. And, as a result, it's the strongest field of the season from top to bottom.
Yeah. Final piece of news for Inside the Circle. Ricky Wysocki has his foundation, the Saki Bomb Foundation. The first initiative has been announced. It is called the First Putt Program. The First Putt Program is designed to add disc golf to mainstream sports in youth experience. And what this looks like is that schools that are nominated for the program or apply for them by themselves to receive a first putt package will receive a package containing 100 putters and a full-sized portable baskets. This is going to be through donations, sponsorships, and corporate partners in order to help make this happen. They announced that the Wynn Elementary School in Las Vegas, Nevada will be receiving the very first putt package on Tuesday, February 22nd. Pictures are to follow. So I think it's exciting news moving forward for the Saki Bomb Foundation. This was announced when he got his deal with Dynamic Discs, and looks like they're making good headway. I think this is a really valuable part and complements, not that they planned this per se, but I think it complements Paul Macbeth's foundation well. That Paul is working to putting courses in underserved areas. You have Ricky, whose foundation is targeting schools and getting programs into schools. I think they're both great foundations that are taking important steps forward that our sport needs.
Yeah, there's such an opportunity for disc golf to grow at the school-based level, elementary, middle, high, even colleges. It's a relatively untapped market and an important one for disc golf to try to get more involved in, and this will help. It's fun. It's simply fun. Like, little kids can get a putter and chuck it at the basket, and you see the clips online of pros going and doing like a clinic at a PE program or something, and they show off how far they can throw, and the kids have a blast, and they all get to throw the putters. And it's a great way to get kids started. And this is such a sensible way. Like, how much does it cost to donate a basket and 100 putters? Don't even put it at retail, right? Put it at the cost of production. A portable basket probably costs $50 to $75, if that. They usually, those are charged. Not a lot of times you see those for like $100. And then a stack of 100 putters is, I don't know, $200 maybe,
$250.
So you're all in for $250 or $300, and this is like something that the PE program can use forever.
Yeah,
it's a great value to offer that to schools, and I think you don't even need that much upfront capital to start making a big impact with something like this. And if you're a parent of a kid and you're like, man, I've always wanted my kid to have the opportunity to throw disc golf at school, well, you can nominate the school now.
Yeah.
So very cool to see. Obviously, very much in line with what Macbeth has done, all the way down to having a board of directors, similar people involved in some cases, with DD being involved in both. I agree with what you said, Josh. I think it's a nice compliment to what Paul's working on.
Another idea. I think I have a foundation that I want to make where disc golfers can loan their discs to schools, and they just always have to have a certain number loaned to them so that they break in your discs for you, and you don't have to spend the time breaking them in. So you lose your go-to driver, you go to the school and you say, I need to take back out my destroyer, please. Here's your new one. Carry on. And there you go. You never have to beat your own disc in again.
I mean, for real though, like, I know you're kidding, but the thing is, like, how many disc golfers have a gigantic shelf or boxes and bins of discs that are just sitting there doing absolutely nothing?
Mm-hmm.
Finding a way to actually get those like into the market, flood the zone with discs. And not that we need 7-year-old elementary school kids having stilettos, but
give them a tilt. Give them what the people want.
This isn't very fun.
Why does it turn 90 degrees? Anyway, that's it for Inside the Circle, Charlie.
I just wanted to mention just about the Wysocki thing. He's pledged to donate $25 for every birdie, $100 for every eagle, and $1,000 for every ace that he cards in the 2022 season. He's also going to donate $1,000 for everybody else's aces at events he attends. So I did the math. He had 426 birdies and 15 eagles in 2021, along with 0 aces. And that would come out to $12,150 in donations to the foundation. That does not include other people's aces because I didn't want to try to figure that out. But I figured that's another, $10,000 to $15,000. So,
yeah,
he's putting up probably 20 to 30 grand. And this is similar to what Paul has done. Paul has just said, I'm donating all of my tournament winnings to my own foundation. Ricky is doing this more sort of something you see in more mainstream sports, I think, where it's like every time a certain thing happens, you donate. So cool to see.
Very cool.
All right. We got an over-under, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I've got a good one for you, Charlie.
Okay.
So this is going to be a season-long one. This is not for next week. The biggest margin of victory at an MPO major. So last season, they were both playoffs. So the answer was 1. I guess it has the potential to be more. I don't know. Actually, it may have technically been 2, depending on Kyle Klein tapped out.
I think once you get to a playoff, it's automatically 1.
I agree. So this is really in regulation. And the line that I've set, I went back and I looked in 2019, back when we had 3 majors, and the largest difference was 3 strokes, I believe. 2 or 3 strokes. I don't remember now. I did research to set my line, and I'm going to set the line. Now I'm panicking at, I'm going to set the line at 3.5.
It's a good number.
because I've seen 3 has definitely happened. But I mean, if someone runs a putt to try and make up a stroke somewhere, I mean, it could drop from 2 to 4 very fast. So yeah, we're gonna go 3.5.
I think we're just past the days of somebody really running away with a major and just like totally dominating.
Okay.
To the point of like a 5 to 10 stroke victory. But 4 does feel like it's possible. I'm gonna take the under though. I'm gonna bet on parity and say that we're gonna have under 3.5. I
really thought about making it a 2.5 line, but I think the 3.5 line's right. And this is for MPO majors. FPO, it's hard to predict with those European women coming over. So we may add that later. But for now, MPO, largest margin of victory, 3.5 strokes. Charlie's got the under. I've got the over.
I mean, I'll just throw it back at you. Let's just do FPO right off.
You just want to do FPO right off?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it earlier in the show. Paige won by 17 strokes at European Open in 2019. 17. I'm not going to set that as the line. I think the line is 7.5.
I'm going to take the under.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take the under. That's a hard line to set though.
It is.
That's a really hard line to set.
I think maybe it should have been 6.5, but I gave it to you. So we'll put them down. By the way, a listener offered to make a website to track our over, under, and picks and let other people put in their own picks. It's a fantastic idea. So I have to look up the email, but if you're listening, we will be reaching out. We think it's a great idea. We want to make sure that we make that a reality so that people can kind of check in on what's going on in the scores and you can battle against us, and maybe we'll find some way to score people points. And if you beat us over the course of the season, you get a big Upshot prize pack at the end of the year. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. That's going to do it for today's edition of the Upshot. For Josh, I'm Charlie saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on the show.